With a name like Oklahoma City, I guess it makes sense for me to take a look at this ink. If there's one thing that can be taken for granted with Robert Oster, it's that if there is a color or idea for them to try, they will try it. And that brings us around to this particular bottle. In this bottle is part of Series 1 of the Cities of America ink collection. Series 1 is a diverse collection of cities and colors from Napa to New York, and from wine red to brown, with some shimmer in between close to Las Vegas. So, for Oklahoma City, they chose green along with a tagline of, "Where the grass always seems greener." Well, being completely honest, I think that particular moniker would have worked better for Kentucky. I mean, sure, our grass can be pretty green for, 3 months of the year. After that, it's either browning from being cooked in the Oklahoma sun, or being starved of water during our winter dry season. So, maybe a more golden green would have been a little bit more appropriate. Also, it seems like this could be a 10-minute rant, so let's move past that and take a look at the ink in question. Moving straight into the ink blot, there are quite a few qualities of this ink that I find quite appealing. The first thing that catches me are the golden undertones present in the darker portions in the transition area. The second thing is that this is more of a subtle shading ink and less of a sheening ink, and I actually prefer this trait. Now, in the lighter tones, we see a nice mix of fern and Russian green that fades into a well-done hunter green. In the transition tones, we have a good mix of seaweed and lime, giving that subtle golden undertone. Quick observation, if there is a heavy storm and you see the sky turn a shade of green like in the upper left-hand corner, just get inside, away from outer walls and windows, and don't ask questions. Now, let's move from the color profile and take a look at the dry times for this ink. First up is a bit of human error, followed by a somewhat respectable dry time on Tomoe. I was able to repeat the results of the lower dry time in 3 additional attempts, so I'm calling the 20-second dry time a valid dry time. With the saturation on this ink, that's not a bad dry time, especially from a medium Lamy nib. Looking at the results on Rhodia, we are looking at sub 15 seconds, and we are also seeing more narrow line width. As for the key performance indicators as far as they go, this one, if it has good water performance, then it could make it into my workplace ink rotation. Speaking of which, let's take a look at the water performance. I was actually expecting a bit more color lift on this one once water hit the page, but this one is starting off pretty well. After a 30-second soak and getting the water off the page, what we're left with, while not being as good as 4001 Dark Green, is still a pretty good result. The green upper layer is gone, but we are left with enough of a ghost layer underneath that the writing is still easily recoverable. So between this and the dry time, I'm happy putting this ink into the regular rotation. That said, let's take a look at how well this one matches up with my BRG Lamy Aeon. First up is the Tomoe sample. This is a good start for this ink as we are starting more towards the hunter seaweed transitions of the darker mids. It's also fairly complementary to the British racing green of the Aeon. Also, keep in mind that this color is coming from a medium nib. Normally, I like to do these writing samples with a broad nib to give you a good look at the full color gamut available for an ink. But with how saturated this ink is, it's a safe bet that most people will be happy with the color profile on display from the finer nib widths. The lubrication and flow seem pretty on point with this one as well. I was able to leave the pen uncapped for 10 minutes on the desk before forcing the pen into a hard start. Keyword there is forcing. Under normal circumstances, there have been no hard starting or skipping issues with this pen and ink combo on Tomoe from day one. Not everyone writes with TR though, so let's take a look at this one over on Rhodia. I've got to admit, as I was writing up the test page for this review, the dry times had me thinking that I was losing line width and that the ink was lying to me over on TR. I can truthfully say that this is not the case. It's not that there isn't any line width loss, as much as it is the nib writing is actually giving us the proper width without the added flow bonuses that we normally find on TR. That said, we really aren't missing out on any of the color profile either, which is very nice to see on display. With some inks that we've looked at, there was a clear difference between the color sets available within a given ink and paper combination. Here, we're starting in the same pleasing hunter seaweed transitions and maintaining a bold green throughout. Finer nibs will have a chance to flirt with the lighter fern tones, and faster writers may very well be able to pull those tones from a medium nib like this one. So, overall, I have to call this ink a win, especially at $17 for a 50ml bottle of ink. Sure, it's a bit more expensive than the standard colors, but the standard colors aren't part of a special collection, are they? And that's going to do it for our look at Robert Oster, Oklahoma City. If you liked the video or found it useful, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and if you want to support the channel and the Dog Treat Fund, as well as get these videos and episodes of the Two Guys Zero Planners podcast before everyone else, then click that Patreon link down below. And as always, don't drink the ink.